Good afternoon. My name is Alfonso David. I'm the counsel to Governor Andrew Cuomo, and I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. Before we begin the program, I would just like to recognize some special guests who have joined us today. Governor David Paterson is here. Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. Speaker of the Assembly Carl Hasty. Public Advocate Letitia James. Senator Adriano Espaillat. Senator Jesse Hamilton. Senator Ruth Hassel Thompson. Senator Kevin Parker. Senator Bill Perkins. Senator Gustavo Rivera. Assemblymember Michael Blake. Assemblymember Arlene Hooper. Assemblymember Walter Mosley. Assemblymember Felix Ortiz. Assemblymember Nick Perry. Assemblymember Robert Rodriguez. Assemblymember Luis Sepulveda. Assemblymember Keith Wright. Also with us today, Hazel Dukes, the New York State President of the NAACP. Donna Lieberman, the Executive Director of the NYCLU. Calvin Butts, the pastor at Ebenesian Baptist Church. Herbert Dodry, the pastor of the House of Lords Church. Michael Hardy, counsel at the National Action Network. And Jay Hutchinson, Senior Vice Chancellor at CUNY. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to take a groundbreaking and significant step forward for our state and this nation, a step that will restore trust in our judicial system, both in practice and perception. When an unarmed civilian dies as a result of an interaction with a law enforcement official, the public must be assured that justice will be delivered. This is an issue that has impacted families and communities across our nation. And today, under Governor Andrew Cuomo's leadership, New York State is standing up and taking executive action to engender trust throughout this state. With his pen today, the governor is standing up for the powerless. He's standing up for those that have no voices. He's standing up for the neighborhoods and communities that have long felt distrust in our system that is tailored to protect all of us. You will hear from a number of speakers, but first, I would like to introduce you to the 56th governor of the state of New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a very good day. It's a day of action. It's a day of fairness. It's a day of justice. It's a day that I think should go a long way towards restoring people's trust in our system of criminal justice and trust in government. It's a pleasure to be here with the families who have lost loved ones and have waged this battle for many, many months, and I applaud them for their good work. We'll hear from them in a moment. It's a pleasure to be with the city officials who are here, the state officials who are here, the members of the clergy who are here. This is a very large and impressive turnout and for an important issue, and the issue actually merits it. It's also a pleasure to be with the Attorney General and Speaker Hasty, and I want to thank my counsel, Alfonso David, who's done a great job on working on this matter. We have so many assemblymen and senators here today, I feel like I'm back in Albany. And we're back in the legislative session. The legislative session ended a couple of weeks ago. As you know, the legislature basically sits from January through June. And we had a very good session in terms of accomplishment. And that's how I judge the session. What did we get done for the people of the state of New York, period? What did we get accomplished? What did we do to make life better for people? And when you look at the record of the session, it's actually more impressive than most people realized. We signed a bill yesterday with Leader Nancy Pelosi that is the campus sexual assault bill that changes the law protecting students on campus. And the Leader Pelosi said that she believes it's the best bill in the nation, and she's going to use it as another opportunity where New York will be first and then spur national action like we have so many times before. This session, we brought more money home for education than ever before in the history of the state of New York, more money for parochial school than ever before in history of the state of New York. We actually funded $1.5 billion for upstate economic development because this is a big state. We brought home a 421A affordable housing program for the city of New York that includes labor and is better than the past program. We renewed the rent laws, and it is the second time in modern political history that the rent laws actually provide more protection for tenants than less protections. The other law was the law we passed in 2011. We have a wage board that's looking at the minimum wage for fast food workers. We're going to be taking action to protect exploited, undocumented workers, which is a crisis that we have today in society. And we are going to be ending the process of putting 16 and 17-year-olds in state prisons where they had no place to be in the first place. One law we did not get passed was a law that would set up a permanent special prosecutor. And it was a top priority for me. I had worked very hard on it. The Assembly actually passed a bill, thanks to the leadership of Assemblyman Keith Wright and the leadership of the Speaker, that would set up a special prosecutor. And we actually spent a great deal of time working with the Assembly and the Senate to try to come up with a resolution. It was a complicated issue. It raised a lot of difficult issues to work through. One of the issues was the upstate members wanted a person who would be appointed regionally. So if there was a situation in upstate New York, that you'd have an upstate person. There were questions about experience. There were questions about credentials, conflicts of interest. So it got very complicated. At the end of the day, we did not pass a law. We did agree mutually that we would come back and work very hard next year to pass a permanent law. But I had said that in the eventuality that we did not pass a law, I didn't want the interim process to be a void. I said I would appoint the Attorney General by executive order, which I can do without a law, to serve that role in the interim. The families are committed to passing a permanent law. I am committed to passing a permanent law. The families asked me, when you do it by executive order, what does that mean? I said, well, it means that it lasts as long as the governor in power wants it to last. So if I have a heart attack, it's over. Without missing a beat, they said, when was the last time you had your blood pressure checked? I don't know if it's a lack of confidence in my health, but they want a permanent law passed, and I agree, and we're going to work together on that for next year. But we don't want to create a vacuum, and we don't want to create a void, and I am going to use my power by executive order to appoint the Attorney General as a special counsel during this interim period. Now, this situation that we're addressing, is a crisis. It's a crisis in this state, and it is a crisis nationwide. It is a crisis of confidence in the criminal justice system. It is a crisis of trust. And the system does not work without trust. No relationship works without trust. Personal relationships don't work without trust. Citizen government relations don't work without trust. But when a community doesn't have trust for the fairness of the criminal justice system, it creates anarchy. And we have had a series of incidents in New York that have raised that question repeatedly. It's the Eric Garner case. Ms. Carr is here. The mother of Eric Garner. It's the Sean Bell case. It's Ramarley Graham. Ms. Malcolm is here. It's Kamani Gray. It's Anthony Rosario. It's Anthony Baez. It's Chantel Davis case here in New York. But it's not just New York. It's nationwide. It's the Michael Brown case in Missouri. It's Freddie Gray in Baltimore. It's Walter Scott in South Carolina, all with a common denominator of a question of trust between basically the minority community and the criminal justice system, and a breakdown of that trust, which has actually fed on itself. Now, our goal is to reverse the energy, reverse the momentum, reverse the dynamic, and start to build trust again. Where does the breakdown of trust start? A belief that there is a conflict of interest when the current criminal justice system investigates cases about law enforcement. Why? Because there's a feeling that the system of criminal justice, the officials in the criminal justice system, are too close to law enforcement. And the feeling is that closeness is a conflict, and that justice is not being done. We resolve that issue today, very simply. An executive order that appoints the Attorney General as a special prosecutor for any case where a conflict may be perceived. So the Attorney General will be a standing prosecutor to handle any case where a law enforcement officer kills an unarmed civilian or kills a civilian and there is a question as to whether or not the civilian is armed and dangerous. Those cases will be the province of the Attorney General and not the local district attorney. So the perceived conflict has been removed. Why? Because we want to start to restore trust. We want to say if you think that was an issue, that issue no longer exists in the state of New York, which, by the way, is the only state in the nation taking an action like this that actually removes those cases from. Now, it doesn't replace the need for a permanent law. I agree. And I've spoken with the Speaker, and I've spoken with Senate Majority Leader Flanagan. We're going to work next year for a permanent law. But it does address this question today, and I think it provides an important template. Now, one point I'd like to make clear. The district attorneys in this city and in this state, I believe, are an extraordinary bunch of fair, professional prosecutors. And I've spoken to them a number of times during this situation. And I've had prosecutors say to me, I've been a DA for decades, district attorney. I've indicted over 200 police officers. How can you say to me that I have a conflict after such a record? Conflict of interest can be real or perceived. But even if there is a perceived conflict of interest, it's a problem. So for myself, I don't even believe there is an actual conflict of interest with the overwhelming majority of DAs. But I do see where there can be a perceived conflict of interest, which is then eroding the trust. And this will answer that. It in no way discredits our district attorneys. I hope to be working with them and talking to them as we fashion a new law for next year. But I know that this law and this executive order will go a long way to doing exactly what we needed to do, which is start to restore the trust so people feel that criminal justice and public safety works for everyone in this city and in this state, black, white, rich, poor. Justice is to be colorblind, right? That's the metaphor. And it's supposed to be blind as to income, blind as to neighborhood, and it's supposed to do the right thing always. And I believe this is a step that we are all proud to take, which will go a long way towards making that a reality. With that, let me turn it over to a woman who I got the chance to know, a spirited woman, an opinionated woman, an informed woman, but a woman who represents many of these families who have taken a very painful situation, losing a loved one, many losing a child, which I believe is the most unnatural loss of all. And I can't even begin to imagine the pain. But they took that pain, and rather than going to a negative place, they went to a positive place. And they made themselves a force for reform and improvement. And today, they accomplished that reform and that improvement. And with that, I turn you over and introduce Constance Malcolm.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Governor, for the kind words. I know I gave you a hard time, but
Oh, don't mention it.
I want to start by saying, we lost our sons and our daughters, our sisters, our brothers, but we chose not to just lay down and give up. We had to stand up and fight. We were thus in a society in this, fight, not because we want to, but we in a boat that nobody wants to be in. And I could say right now, it's very crowded. We don't need anybody else in this boat. And this executive order is going to put an end to it. And that's one of Eric Garner's words: it stops today. This executive order is very important. It's inherent and fundamental conflict of interest that exists when local DA, attorney handle police killings of civilians. We know from case of our sons' loved ones who were killed so ingrievously, with clear evidence, but yet DA were unable to indict and convict those police officers who was responsible for the murders. DA can argue all they want, but it's been decade-long. Records of failure in these cases indisputable. It's not just in New York, it's all across the country. That's why President Obama, Task Force of 21st Century Policing, made a requirement that consists with the special prosecutor we've been pushing. Many of the families that were part of this campaign have been working to help achieve this critical reform for decades, and have been told time and again that it wouldn't happen. But we proved, we did it, we made it happen. So this reform stems from legislation of New York, whose unnecessary deaths goes back as long time as the leadership of their family. we remain commitment to work towards the passing and executive of strong permanent solution in the form of legislation, and to make sure the special prosecutor is adequately funded. While New York is taking national leadership in acting reform of this systematic conflict of interest problem with local DA, we know there is much work to be done to ensure that our children, our family members, and New Yorkers are not unjustly killed by police in the first place. Nothing will bring our sons or family members back, but we don't want another incident, unjustly violent, that takes the life of her loved ones. But today we are moving forward with important reforms. With that said, like I said, we are mothers that lost our loved one, and we didn't give up. We chose to fight back and let us know we're not going to just lay back and let this keep happening, because years and years, it's been decades that's been going on, and no police officer had murdered anybody, had to take any responsibility for their action. We have to go to the Department of Justice to get justice, and sometimes it don't even pan out to nothing. We have to wait years to even get an answer to know if something's going to, we're going to get an indictment or the case is going to go forward. So with that said, we made a victory today. And because of family and activists that push and stand with the family and say no more, we did it. We made it. Now I would like to turn it over to the Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is the strongest commitment of my office that we follow every day the principle of equal justice under law. That is the guiding principle for the lawyers in my office and everything we do. And I thank the governor, the speaker, my colleagues in government, council, and particularly I want to thank the families without whose activism we would not be here today. But equal justice under law is not just a slogan engraved over our courthouses. This is the essence of what the United States of America is about. And last year, at the end of last year, I stood with advocates and public officials from across the state to demand change and to say that our system, once again, had to change to move it closer to that American ideal of equal justice under law. And as the governor noted, there are far too many Americans who feel that the system isn't providing equal justice for all people, particularly for people of color. Pretending a problem isn't there doesn't help solve the problem. So I'm glad we're here today talking about it openly and taking a very important step forward. The governor's executive order, which he's going to sign today, is a step to address a crisis of confidence. And it's important to understand that the prosecutors of the state of New York, I'm one of the prosecutors of New York State, are diligent, hardworking people who seek to follow the law fairly and do their jobs. But when there is a crisis of confidence in the justice system cannot work. That's inherent in American democracy. Justice Felix Frankfurter once said, justice must satisfy the appearance of justice. If people can't see that the system is fair, the system won't work. They won't cooperate, they won't come forward, they won't work with the police and with the prosecutors, and without that cooperation, we can have no law and order, we can have no true American justice system. So today, with his executive order designating me as special prosecutor, I can assure you that our office will handle these cases with the highest level of care, professionalism, and independence, that we will investigate thoroughly and impartially, and that we are going to view this as a step towards greater reforms, because there are many reforms needed in our criminal justice system. I'm proud to be here today as New York takes the lead once again. But thanks to the families that are here, and I know we have quite a few here today, and your activism, and thanks to the activism of others all across America, we are starting to re-examine the premise of our entire system of mass arrest and mass incarceration. That era is coming to an end, ladies and gentlemen, and we take a step towards that end today. And I am committed to working with the governor, with the legislature, with our district attorneys, with the families and advocates and criminal justice reform experts, as I have been doing for many, many years, to address this, to enact a permanent law dealing with the issue of prosecution when there are deaths and law enforcement officers are involved, and other problems of the criminal justice system that we must address together, but we must address them all together. And ladies and gentlemen, today, with the governor's order, New York takes a very important step forward in this process of ensuring that our system of justice does provide equal justice under law. And I thank you, and now I want to turn this over to the Speaker of the New York State Assembly, without whom we would not be here today, Assemblymember Carl Hasty.
Thank you, Art. Thank you to the Attorney General for the introduction. First, let me thank the Governor for taking this action, showing true leadership, not only here in the state, but in the nation. I also want to acknowledge my Assembly colleagues that are here, particularly Assemblyman Keith Wright, who, based on the feelings and the pain of families over the years, we wanted to, even while we were still trying to negotiate legislation with the Governor and the Senate, to send a message to the families that we did hear their message and their pain. And to the families, and particularly to this young lady sitting next to me, she is my constituent, and what happened to her son happened in my assembly district, and I'd have to say it's one of the most painful things that has happened to me, not only as a legislator, but as a person, because I've gotten so close to the family that I can actually, in some degree, feel the pain that they've gone through. This further, once again, and I'll tell a little joke about Constance. When I first was elected Speaker, she reached out to me, and I knew it wasn't to have a congratulatory meeting about me becoming Speaker, but I knew what it was about, and I had said to her that there was no way that, with me now becoming Speaker, that I could let not only the other families down, but particularly her and her family down, and that we would continue our commitment to make sure that we can get a permanent resolution to this. And as the Governor touched on, and as Constance touched on, this is not about the confidence or lack of confidence in the district attorneys. It's about giving the families the comfort that at the end of the day, if another family, and God forbid, I hope that we never have to deal with another family having to go through this, that they should never at the end of the day question what happened if there's some kind of a perceived conflict. And one of the things, and as we were nearing the session, and I remember saying to the Governor in the negotiating sessions that if we couldn't come up with a piece of legislation that did what we needed to be done in terms of total criminal justice reform, in terms of grand jury minutes, that I had the utmost confidence that if he appointed the Attorney General, on an interim basis or by executive order, that it would, one, give the family some comfort, but also knowing the person that Eric is, that the families and any further family that, as again I said, God forbid, if they have to go through this, that there would be some comfort that his office and his professionalism would investigate these cases to the utmost of his ability and his integrity. And this just further goes to show, and I've said this once I was elected Speaker, that for me to be able to have the opportunity to sit here for my colleagues and not ignore my race, it would be a shame if we didn't have a top-down review of the criminal justice system, because I think me serving as Speaker would be in vain if we didn't do that. So I'd like to now turn this over to Yul Sanlim, who is the co-director of the Justice Committee.
Thank you. This executive order that Governor Cuomo is signing today is a very important step towards addressing the inherent conflict of interest that district attorneys have when prosecuting police officers who take the lives of New Yorkers. It is a long-time historic and systemic problem, and this is a change that is a long time in coming. Had it come earlier, unfortunately, we would not have some of the families who are sitting here today, because we would not have seen as many police killings in the many years since the demand has come out for this change. The other thing that this executive order does is set New York up as a leader for the rest of the nation, and the Justice Committee and the families firmly hope that the rest of the nation will take leadership from New York State and follow suit. This is something that's sorely needed across the country. The Justice Committee, our role has been to stand behind the families who have been waging the campaign to urge the governor to do this executive order. I want to say for you the names of the women who are here and also the names of their loved ones. They are, and I would ask if you all could stand as I say them, they are Natasha Duncan, the sister of Chantel Davis. Carol Gray, the mother of Kimani Gray. Hawa Ba, the mother of Mohammed Ba. Gwen Carr, the mother of Eric Garner. Cynthia Howell, the niece of Alberta Sproul. Margarita Rosario, the mother of Anthony Rosario and the aunt of Hilton Vega. Iris Baez, the mother of Anthony Baez. And Valerie Bell, the mother of Sean Bell. And of course, we have Constance Malcolm, the mother of Ramarley Graham. These are some of the mothers and the family members who have been fighting this in this campaign. Some of the other families who are also very involved, the family of Amadou Diallo, the family of Jason Tirado, the family of, there are many other families, so I'm not going to list them all. The family of Noel Polanco is another. And unfortunately, the names go on and on. Some of these names, some of these families, some of the families here have been fighting this fight since the 1990s. So this is a very, very important step forward. And I have to say that these women, these family members have been providing leadership for organizations like the Justice Committee and really for the entire movement that is fighting for change and justice in this country. So again, I just want to really applaud them. I also want to thank the Attorney General's office for putting the call out in the end of the year for this executive order to move forward. And I, of course, want to thank the organizations in the Coalition Communities United for Police Reform who have been instrumental in standing behind the families as we've moved this forward. So once again, thank you all for being here, and this is a very, very important day. And I'll turn it over now to Alfonso David.
Thank you, Yol-san. Again, thank you to the families for coming. Thank you to all of the advocacy organizations and the elected officials that are here. We will now take the historic step, or the governor will, and sign the executive order appointing the special prosecutor.
Yeah, let me make one final point before we actually sign, if I might. This was a very difficult, complicated issue. And I'm proud of not just what we did, but how we did it. There was a real chance that when you start to have this conversation, it gets very hot, very emotional, it gets racial, it gets controversial, and that then impedes progress. People start to think emotionally and feel emotionally and stop thinking logically. And when this conversation has been happening in other parts of the country, the dialogue, frankly, turned ugly, and it turned ugly quickly. That did not happen here in New York. We discussed the issues, we discussed them honestly, but we discussed them without emotion, without bias, understanding that we're all in this together, and that's what makes New York special. I want to thank the families who were extraordinary. I want to thank the religious community. Reverend Calvin Butts, Reverend Daughtry are here today. They did a phenomenal job. I want to thank our federal colleagues, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries and Congressman Charlie Rangel were very helpful in this. I want to thank Michael Hardy and the National Action Network for what they did, and the government officials, the Speaker, the Attorney General, Assemblyman Wright, Tish James. Everybody did their job, but they did it with sensitivity and they did it with understanding. And we came out at the right place, and we came out at the right place the right way. So give yourselves a round of applause and let's sign the executive order.